The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval base as Commander Sarah Mitchell walked through the gates for what she knew would be the most important day of her career. She had been summoned to Admiral Harrison's office, and everyone knew that when the Admiral called, it was never good news. Her polished boots clicked against the concrete as she made her way past rows of uniformed personnel who whispered among themselves. Sarah had served in the Navy for 15 years, working her way up from a fresh-faced ensign to her current position as commander. She had seen action in 3 different conflicts, led rescue missions in treacherous waters, and earned the respect of every sailor under her command. Yet today, she felt the familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach as she approached the Admiral's headquarters. The secretary at the front desk barely looked up as Sarah announced herself. "The Admiral is waiting for you," she said in a cold voice. "Go right in." Admiral Harrison was a man who commanded respect through fear rather than admiration. He had been in charge of the base for 5 years, and during that time, he had made it clear that he believed women had no place in combat positions. Sarah had felt his disapproval from the moment she arrived at the base 6 months ago. He questioned her decisions, undermined her authority, and made her life difficult at every turn. As Sarah entered the spacious office, she saw Admiral Harrison sitting behind his massive oak desk, his face stern and unwelcoming. The walls were covered with photographs of his military achievements, medals, and commendations. Behind him hung a large American flag, and the morning light streaming through the windows created an imposing atmosphere. "Commander Mitchell," the Admiral said without looking up from the papers on his desk. "Sit down." Sarah remained standing at attention, her hands clasped behind her back. "Sir, you requested to see me." The Admiral finally looked up, his gray eyes cold and calculating. "I've been reviewing your performance reports, Commander. It seems there have been some concerns about your leadership capabilities." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure. She knew this was coming. For weeks, she had noticed the Admiral building a case against her, questioning her orders, and creating situations designed to make her fail. "Sir, my record speaks for itself. My unit has exceeded all performance standards since I took command." "Your unit," the Admiral said with a sneer, "has been the subject of numerous complaints. Your aggressive tactics, your inability to follow proper protocol, and your general disrespect for authority have not gone unnoticed." The accusations were baseless, and Sarah knew it. Her unit was one of the most efficient and successful on the base. Her sailors respected her because she earned their trust through competence and fairness, not through intimidation. But she also knew that arguing with the Admiral would only make things worse. "Furthermore," the Admiral continued, standing up and walking around his desk, "I've received reports that you've been questioning orders from superior officers. This kind of insubordination cannot be tolerated in the Navy." Sarah's hands clenched into fists behind her back, but her voice remained steady. "Sir, I have never disobeyed a direct order. If there have been instances where I've sought clarification on orders that seemed unclear or potentially dangerous to my crew, then I make no apology for that. The safety of my sailors is my primary concern." The Admiral's face reddened with anger. "Your primary concern should be following orders without question. This is the military, not a democracy where every decision is up for debate." For the next 30 minutes, the Admiral continued his verbal assault, listing every minor infraction he could find in Sarah's record, questioning her judgment, and making it clear that he wanted her gone. He spoke about the importance of discipline, the need for unquestioning obedience, and his belief that some people were simply not cut out for military service. Sarah listened to every word, her anger building with each passing moment. She thought about all the nights she had spent studying, all the training exercises she had excelled in, all the dangerous missions she had successfully completed. She thought about the sailors under her command, who looked to her for guidance and protection. She thought about every woman who had served before her and paved the way for her career. Finally, the Admiral returned to his desk and picked up a folder. I'm recommending you for immediate transfer to a desk job at headquarters. Your combat days are over, Commander. You'll be processing paperwork and filing reports from now on. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. A desk job meant the end of everything she had worked for. It meant giving up her command, abandoning her sailors, and accepting defeat. It meant letting the Admiral win. Sir, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper, I request permission to speak freely. The Admiral waved his hand dismissively. You can speak all you want, Commander. It won't change anything. My decision is final. Sarah looked around the office, taking in the Admiral's achievements displayed on the walls. She noticed how many of them were from conflicts where he had commanded from the safety of headquarters, while others did the actual fighting. She thought about the stories she had heard from other sailors about his tendency to take credit for their successes, while blaming them for any failures. Sir, I believe there has been a serious mistake in your evaluation of my performance, Sarah began. My record shows consistent excellence in every assignment I've been given. My unit has the highest efficiency rating on this base, the lowest incident rate, and the highest morale scores. My sailors trust me because I've proven myself to them through action, not through intimidation. The Admiral's eyes narrowed dangerously. Are you questioning my judgment, Commander? I'm stating facts, sir. Facts that are documented in the official reports that apparently you haven't bothered to read carefully. The tension in the room was palpable. Sarah knew she was walking a dangerous line, but she also knew that if she didn't stand up for herself now, her career would be over anyway. She had nothing left to lose. The Admiral stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. His face was now completely red with anger, and the veins in his neck were visible. How dare you speak to me with that tone? I've been in this Navy longer than you've been alive. I've served in conflicts that you can't even imagine. And yet, Sarah said quietly, you've never actually led troops into combat. You've never had to make split-second decisions that could mean life or death for the people under your command. You've never had to look into the eyes of a young sailor and promise them that you'll bring them home safely. The Admiral's hands were shaking with rage. That's enough! I want you out of my office, out of my base, out of my Navy! His voice had risen to a shout, and Sarah was sure that everyone in the outer office could hear him. But she wasn't finished yet. She had spent too many years being silent, too many years accepting unfair treatment, too many years watching good people be destroyed by petty tyrants like Admiral Harrison. You want me out? Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. Fine. But before I go, there's something you need to see. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small black case. The Admiral watched suspiciously as she opened it, revealing 5 bronze stars nestled in velvet. But these weren't just any stars. They were Bronze Star medals, awarded for heroic or meritorious achievement in a combat zone. The Admiral's eyes widened in shock. He had assumed that Sarah's service record was typical for a female officer, mostly administrative duties with perhaps some minor support roles. He had never bothered to actually read her full file, instead, relying on his own prejudices and assumptions. Sarah carefully removed each medal from the case and placed them on the Admiral's desk, one by one. The metallic clink of each star hitting the wooden surface seemed to echo through the suddenly silent office. The first one, Sarah said calmly, was awarded for leading a rescue mission in hostile waters during Hurricane Maria. My team saved 37 civilians from a sinking cruise ship while under fire from enemy forces. She placed the second star on the desk. This one was for commanding a joint operation that successfully evacuated an entire village before enemy forces arrived. 0 casualties among the civilians or my crew. The third star joined the others. Operation Desert Shield. My unit was credited with destroying 3 enemy supply lines and capturing 15 enemy combatants. We held our position for 6 days against overwhelming odds. The Admiral was staring at the medals in disbelief. His mouth was slightly open, and for the first time since Sarah had known him, he seemed to be at a loss for words. Sarah placed the 4th star on the desk. This one came after I single-handedly disabled an enemy submarine that was threatening to destroy a hospital ship. I swam underwater for over a mile in full gear to plant the charges. Finally, she placed the 5th and final star on the desk. And this last one was awarded just 3 months ago for successfully negotiating the release of 12 American hostages. I spent 2 weeks behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence and planning the rescue operation. The office was completely silent, except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. The Admiral stared at the 5 bronze stars, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. These weren't the kind of awards given out for filing paperwork or following orders. These were medals awarded for extraordinary courage, leadership, and skill in combat situations. Sarah stood perfectly still, her hands once again clasped behind her back. She watched as the Admiral's face went through a series of expressions: shock, confusion, disbelief, and finally, something that might have been embarrassment. "I don't understand," the Admiral finally managed to say. "These medals, your file, there must be some mistake." "No mistake, sir," Sarah replied. "Every one of those medals is documented in my official service record. The problem is that you never bothered to read beyond the first page, where it lists my gender and current assignment." The Admiral picked up one of the stars, turning it over in his hands. The engraving on the back confirmed its authenticity, along with Sarah's name and the date of the action for which it was awarded. "But you're just a—" he started to say, then stopped himself. "A woman," Sarah finished for him. "Yes, sir, I am. But I'm also one of the most decorated officers on this base. I'm also someone who has proven herself in combat more times than most of the male officers under your command." The Admiral set the medal back down on the desk and sank into his chair. For the first time since Sarah had entered the office, he looked uncertain and vulnerable. The confident, intimidating persona he had maintained for so long seemed to crack before her eyes. Sarah had wondered many times what it would feel like to finally confront the Admiral with the truth about her service record. She had imagined it would be satisfying, that she would feel vindicated and powerful, but instead she found herself feeling something unexpected: pity. Here was a man who had spent his entire career believing that his gender made him superior to half of his fellow officers. He had made important decisions based on prejudice rather than facts. He had potentially damaged careers and wasted talent because of his inability to see past his own biases. The silence stretched on for several minutes. Sarah could hear voices in the hallway outside, the normal sounds of a busy naval base going about its daily business. But inside the Admiral's office, time seemed to stand still. Finally, the Admiral looked up at her. His eyes, which had been so cold and hostile just minutes before, now showed confusion and something that might have been respect. "Commander Mitchell," he said quietly, "I believe we need to have a different conversation." The Admiral's office felt different now. The same morning sunlight streamed through the windows, the same American flag hung on the wall, and the same photographs of military achievements decorated the space. But something fundamental had changed in the atmosphere between Admiral Harrison and Commander Mitchell. Sarah remained standing while the Admiral studied the 5 bronze stars spread across his desk. Each medal caught the light differently, their bronze surfaces telling stories of courage and sacrifice that he was only now beginning to understand. The weight of his ignorance settled on his shoulders like a heavy coat. "Please, Commander," the Admiral said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Sit down." For the first time that morning, it wasn't an order. It was a request. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then took the offered seat. She kept her posture erect and professional, but some of the tension in the room had dissipated. Admiral Harrison picked up Sarah's service file, the same file he had claimed to have reviewed thoroughly just an hour earlier. Now he opened it completely, reading page after page of commendations, successful mission reports, and glowing evaluations from superior officers. Each page revealed another layer of accomplishment that he had dismissed or ignored. Operation Neptune's Shield, he read aloud. You led a team of 20 sailors in a covert mission to disable enemy communications equipment. The mission was completed with no casualties and resulted in the capture of significant intelligence. He looked up at Sarah. I remember this operation. The official reports credited Captain Williams with its success. Sarah's expression didn't change, but her voice carried a hint of steel. Captain Williams was indeed the commanding officer for the overall mission, sir. However, he remained aboard the ship while my team executed the actual operation on the ground. It's not uncommon for higher-ranking officers to receive credit for successful missions, regardless of who actually led them. The Admiral continued reading, his discomfort growing with each page. Rescue operation during the Typhoon Helena. You personally saved 8 sailors from a sinking vessel during 20-foot seas. He paused. According to this report, you dove into the water repeatedly, despite being injured yourself. I had a dislocated shoulder from the initial rescue attempt, Sarah confirmed. But there were still men in the water. Leaving them wasn't an option. The Admiral set down the file and leaned back in his chair. The confident, authoritative man who had been berating Sarah an hour earlier now looked tired and confused. Commander, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Why didn't you ever mention these accomplishments? Why didn't you correct me when I questioned your competence? Sarah considered her answer carefully. Sir, with respect, would it have made a difference? Every time I've tried to discuss my qualifications or experience with you, you've cut me off or dismissed what I had to say. You made it clear from the first day I arrived at this base that you had already formed an opinion about my capabilities based solely on my gender. The Admiral winced. The truth of her words was undeniable, but hearing it stated so plainly was painful. That's a serious accusation, Commander. It's also an accurate one, Sarah replied without hesitation. Sir, in the 6 months I've been stationed here, you've questioned every decision I've made, undermined my authority in front of my subordinates, and excluded me from important planning meetings. When Lieutenant Johnson made the same tactical recommendation I had made just days earlier, you praised his initiative and strategic thinking. The weight of specific examples made the Admiral's discriminatory behavior impossible to deny. He had indeed treated Sarah differently than his male officers, and now he was forced to confront the reality of his actions. I've spent my entire career having to prove myself over and over again, Sarah continued. Not just to enemy forces or dangerous situations, but to fellow officers who assumed I was less capable because I'm a woman. I've learned that no amount of medals or commendations can change the mind of someone who doesn't want to see my value. The Admiral stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the base where hundreds of sailors were going about their daily duties. Men and women working together, following orders, protecting their country. He had been so focused on his own prejudices that he had failed to see the bigger picture. Commander, I owe you an apology, he said, still facing the window. A significant apology. I've been unfair to you, and I've potentially damaged your career based on assumptions rather than facts. Sarah said nothing, waiting to see if his words would be followed by meaningful action. The Admiral turned around, his face showing more emotion than Sarah had ever seen from him. But I need you to understand something. This isn't easy for me. I've been in the Navy for 32 years. When I started, there were very few women in combat roles. The culture was different. The expectations were different. Times change, sir, Sarah said quietly. But that doesn't excuse ignoring someone's actual performance in favor of outdated assumptions. The Admiral nodded slowly. You're right, and I'm beginning to realize that my resistance to change may have cost this base some of its most valuable officers." He paused, seeming to wrestle with his thoughts. "Tell me about your current unit, Commander. Give me your honest assessment of their capabilities and morale." Sarah shifted slightly in her chair. This was territory she felt confident discussing. "My unit consists of 43 sailors, ranging from new recruits to veterans with 10 years of experience. When I took command 6 months ago, they had the lowest efficiency ratings on the base and the highest disciplinary problems." The Admiral frowned. "I remember. That's why I assigned you to them. I thought—" He stopped himself, realizing how his reasoning would sound. "You thought I couldn't make them any worse," Sarah finished for him. "And you were probably hoping I'd fail so you'd have justification for removing me from command entirely." The Admiral's silence confirmed her assessment. Sarah continued. "Today, that same unit has the highest efficiency ratings on the base. Disciplinary problems have decreased by 80%. Our last 3 training exercises have been completed ahead of schedule and under budget. Morale surveys show that my sailors have the highest job satisfaction scores of any unit in the fleet." "How?" the Admiral asked simply. "By treating them with respect, by listening to their concerns, by making decisions based on what's best for the mission and the safety of the crew. Not on what makes me look good to superior officers." Sarah's voice grew stronger. "By leading through example rather than intimidation." The words hung in the air between them, and both officers understood the implications. Sarah wasn't just describing her leadership style. She was contrasting it with the Admiral's approach. The Admiral returned to his desk and sat down heavily. "You know, Commander, reading your file today has been educational. But it's also raised some questions I'm not sure I know how to answer." Sarah waited for him to continue. "If you're as accomplished as these records indicate, why aren't you a captain by now? Why haven't you been promoted beyond commander?" The Admiral seemed genuinely puzzled. Sarah had been waiting years for someone to ask that question. "Sir, promotions in the Navy aren't based solely on merit or performance. They require recommendations from superior officers. They require advocates who believe in your potential and are willing to support your advancement." The implication was clear, but the Admiral needed to hear it stated directly. "In 15 years of service, how many of your commanding officers have actively supported your promotion?" he asked. "2, Sarah answered without hesitation. "Captain Rodriguez and Admiral Chen. Both of them wrote strong recommendations for my advancement, but both were overruled or ignored by other officers in the promotion review process." The Admiral felt a growing sense of shame as he began to understand how the system had failed not just Sarah, but potentially many other qualified officers. "What about the others?" "The other commanding officers you've served under?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "Some were indifferent. They didn't actively work against me, but they didn't support me either. Others—" She gestured vaguely at the Admiral's desk where her medals still lay scattered. "Others were like me," the Admiral finished quietly. "Yes, sir." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. The Admiral's secretary entered without waiting for permission, her face flushed with urgency. "Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's been an emergency. The cargo ship Northern Star is taking on water about 50 miles from shore. They've got 30 crew members on board, and the Coast Guard is requesting immediate assistance." The Admiral immediately stood up, his military training taking over. "What resources do we have available?" "The destroyer USS Hampton is closest to their position, but they're reporting engine problems. The next closest vessel is the USS Meridian, but they're at least 3 hours away." Sarah had been listening intently to the conversation. She knew the Northern Star. It was a civilian cargo vessel that regularly supplied remote military outposts. 30 crew members in distress was a serious situation that required immediate action. "Sir," Sarah said, standing up, "my unit has been training for exactly this type of rescue operation. We can have a team ready to deploy in 20 minutes. The Admiral looked at her, clearly torn between his instinct to handle the crisis himself and his new understanding of Sarah's capabilities. Commander, this is a dangerous situation. High seas, uncertain weather conditions, and a time-critical rescue operation. Which is exactly the type of mission I've successfully completed multiple times, Sarah replied firmly. Sir, those sailors don't have time for us to debate my qualifications. They need help now. The secretary looked between the Admiral and Sarah, sensing the tension but not understanding its source. Sir, what should I tell the Coast Guard? For a long moment, the Admiral said nothing. Sarah could see him struggling with decades of ingrained thinking, weighing his prejudices against the evidence of her competence. The medals on his desk seemed to gleam in the afternoon light, silent testimony to her proven abilities. Finally, he made his decision. Tell the Coast Guard that Commander Mitchell will be leading the rescue operation, he said. And get me a direct line to the USS Hampton so I can coordinate support. Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with relief. Thank you, sir. I'll need authorization to use the high-speed rescue boats and a helicopter for aerial reconnaissance. You have whatever you need, the Admiral said, his voice carrying new authority and conviction. Commander, I want you to know that this isn't just about proving yourself to me anymore. Those sailors out there need the best officer we have available, and based on what I've learned today, that officer is you. Sarah nodded crisply and turned toward the door, already mentally planning the rescue operation. But the Admiral's voice stopped her. Commander Mitchell, she turned back to face him. Bring them home safely, all of them. Yes, sir. That's exactly what I intend to do. As Sarah left the office, the Admiral looked down at the 5 bronze stars still scattered across his desk. In just a few hours, he would learn whether his change of heart had come too late or whether there was still time to make things right. The rescue operation began with the sound of helicopter blades cutting through the afternoon air. Commander Sarah Mitchell stood on the deck of the rescue vessel, her hair whipping in the wind as she coordinated the most complex mission she had faced since arriving at Admiral Harrison's base. The Northern Star was listing badly to starboard, and maritime radio reports indicated that the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Sarah's team of 12 highly trained sailors moved with precision and purpose. Each member knew their role in the operation, and their confidence in their commander was evident in every action they took. Chief Petty Officer Martinez handled communications with the Coast Guard, while Lieutenant Stevens coordinated with the helicopter pilot circling overhead. Admiral Harrison remained in his office, but he had established a direct communication link with Sarah's team. For the first time in his career, he found himself relying completely on an officer whose abilities he had previously questioned. The irony wasn't lost on him as he listened to Sarah's calm, professional voice directing the rescue operation. Control? This is Rescue Team Alpha, Sarah's voice crackled through the radio. We have visual contact with the Northern Star. The vessel is listing approximately 30 degrees and taking on water rapidly. We count 26 crew members on deck, with 4 still unaccounted for. The Admiral leaned closer to the radio. Commander Mitchell, what's your assessment of the situation? Sir, the weather is deteriorating faster than predicted. We've got 15-foot swells and winds gusting up to 40 knots. The Northern Star has maybe 20 minutes before she goes under completely. We need to move fast. Through his office window, the Admiral could see the darkening sky. What had started as a routine rescue operation was becoming increasingly dangerous. He found himself second-guessing his decision to put Sarah in charge, not because of her gender, but because of the genuine concern any commanding officer feels when sending people into harm's way. Sarah's voice came through the radio again, steady and controlled. Control, we're deploying rescue boats now. Chief Martinez will take Team 1 to the starboard side where most of the crew is gathered. Lieutenant Stevens will take Team 2 to search for the missing crew members. The Admiral watched the operation unfold through real-time reports from the helicopter pilot. The rescue boats, small and agile, cut through the choppy waves toward the sinking cargo ship. The Northern Star was clearly in distress, sitting low in the water and tilting at an angle that suggested structural damage below the waterline. "This is Team 1, Martinez's voice reported. "We've reached the first group of survivors. Beginning evacuation now." The rescue proceeded smoothly at first. The crew members of the Northern Star were experienced sailors who understood the urgency of the situation. They moved quickly but carefully into the rescue boats, following Sarah's team's instructions without panic or confusion. But as the operation continued, the weather worsened. The waves grew higher, making it increasingly difficult for the small rescue boats to maintain position alongside the sinking ship. The Admiral listened tensely as radio communications became more frequent and urgent. "Control, this is Team 2, Lieutenant Stevens reported. "We've located 3 of the missing crew members trapped in the lower deck. The compartment is flooded, but we can reach them. However, 1 crew member is injured and unconscious." Sarah's response was immediate and decisive. "Team 2, maintain position. I'm coming down to assist with the injured crew member." The Admiral felt his heart skip a beat. "Commander Mitchell, you're needed to coordinate the overall operation. Let your team handle the rescue." "Sir, my team is handling the operation perfectly, but they need someone with advanced medical training to help with the injured sailor, and I'm the only one on this mission with that qualification." Before the Admiral could respond, Sarah was already moving. The helicopter pilot provided a running commentary as she rappelled from her command vessel to Stevens' rescue boat, then swam the final distance to the Northern Star in full gear. The next 20 minutes were the longest in Admiral Harrison's career. He listened as Sarah worked to stabilize the injured crew member while coordinating the evacuation of the remaining sailors. Her voice never wavered, even when reporting that the ship was listing further and that they had only minutes before the lower decks became completely inaccessible. "Control, this is Mitchell. The injured crew member has a head trauma and possible internal injuries. We need immediate medical evacuation once we reach the surface." "Understood, Commander. Medical team is standing by." The Admiral found himself gripping the edge of his desk as the reports continued. Sarah had entered the flooded compartment of a sinking ship to personally ensure that no crew member was left behind. This wasn't just competent leadership. This was exactly the kind of heroism that had earned her those Bronze Stars. "Team 1, this is Mitchell. All survivors from your sector are secure. Begin return to base immediately." "Team 2, we've got the injured crew member stabilized. Moving to evacuation point now." The helicopter pilot's voice provided the final update. "Control, this is Sky Eye. All rescue boats are clear of the Northern Star. The ship is going down. She's gone under completely." A collective sigh of relief seemed to echo through the radio communications. The Admiral realized he had been holding his breath for the past several minutes. The operation had been completed successfully, with all 30 crew members rescued and only 1 serious injury. "Control, this is Commander Mitchell. Mission accomplished. All survivors are accounted for and en route to base. Estimated arrival time is 45 minutes. The Admiral leaned back in his chair, feeling a mixture of relief, admiration, and shame. Relief that everyone had been rescued safely, admiration for the skill and courage Sarah had demonstrated, and shame for how close he had come to destroying the career of one of the most capable officers under his command. An hour later, Sarah stood once again in the Admiral's office. Her uniform was still damp from seawater, and there was a small bandage on her forehead where she had been injured during the rescue operation. But her posture was erect and professional as she delivered her after-action report. "Sir, all 30 crew members of the Northern Star have been successfully evacuated. 29 are in good condition and have been processed through medical screening. The injured crew member, Seaman Thompson, is in stable condition at the base hospital with a concussion and 3 broken ribs." The Admiral nodded, making notes in his official log. "And your team, Commander? Any injuries or problems during the operation?" Minor injuries only, sir. Chief Martinez has a sprained wrist, and I received a small cut during the underwater rescue. Nothing that will affect our operational readiness. The Admiral set down his pen and looked directly at Sarah. Commander, I've been in the Navy for 32 years, and I've never seen a rescue operation executed with such precision under such difficult conditions. Your team performed flawlessly, and your personal courage in entering that flooding compartment saved a man's life. Sarah accepted the praise with a simple nod. Thank you, sir. My team is well-trained and highly motivated. They deserve the credit for today's success. The Admiral stood up and walked around his desk. The 5 bronze stars were still lying where Sarah had placed them hours earlier, but now they seemed to tell a different story. Instead of being symbols of defiance, they had become evidence of exactly the kind of leader the Navy needed. Commander Mitchell, I need to make something clear to you. This morning I was prepared to end your career based on my own prejudices and assumptions. I was wrong, completely and unequivocally wrong. Sarah waited for him to continue, unsure where the conversation was heading. Your performance today, combined with what I learned about your service record, has forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about my own leadership and my treatment of the officers under my command. The Admiral picked up one of the bronze stars, turning it over in his hands. These medals represent real courage, real leadership, and real results. The fact that I dismissed their significance because of your gender is a failure on my part that I can never fully undo. He set the medal back down and faced Sarah directly. But I can try to make things right going forward. I'm recommending you for immediate promotion to captain, and I'm putting you in charge of all rescue and emergency response operations for this base. Sarah felt a surge of emotion that she carefully controlled. After years of fighting for recognition and advancement, the offer of promotion felt almost surreal. Sir, I appreciate your confidence, but I need to know that this promotion is based on my merits and not on guilt about how you've treated me. The Admiral smiled slightly, the first genuine smile Sarah had ever seen from him. Commander, after today's operation, anyone who questions your merits would have to be blind or willfully ignorant. And I've been both of those things for too long. He walked back to his desk and picked up her service file. I'm also ordering a complete review of promotion procedures on this base. I want to ensure that no other qualified officers have been overlooked because of gender, race, or any other factor that has nothing to do with their ability to serve. Sarah felt a sense of vindication that went beyond her own situation. Sir, there are several other female officers on this base who have been similarly undervalued. Lieutenants Parker and Chen in particular have exceptional records that deserve recognition. I'll review their files personally, the Admiral promised, and I'll make sure they receive fair consideration for advancement. The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Chief Petty Officer Martinez entered, still wearing his wet weather gear from the rescue operation. Sir, I wanted to report that the medical team has confirmed Seaman Thompson is out of danger. The doctor said that Commander Mitchell's field medical work probably saved his life. The Admiral looked at Sarah with new respect. Is there any part of military service that you haven't excelled at, Commander? I'm still working on diplomatic relations with difficult superior officers, Sarah replied with a slight smile. But I think I made some progress on that today. The Admiral laughed, a sound that surprised everyone in the room, including himself. Yes, I think you did. Chief Martinez looked confused by the exchange, but he continued his report. Also, sir, the crew of the Northern Star wanted to express their gratitude personally. They asked me to tell you that they've never seen such a professional and courageous rescue operation. After Martinez left, the Admiral and Sarah stood in comfortable silence for a few moments. The afternoon sun was setting outside the window, casting long shadows across the office that had witnessed such a dramatic transformation in their relationship. Commander Mitchell, the Admiral said finally, I have one more thing to ask of you. Sarah straightened, ready for whatever new challenge he might present. I want you to help me become a better leader. I want you to help me understand how my biases and assumptions have affected other officers under my command. I want to learn from the mistakes I've made so I don't repeat them. The request was unexpected and revealing. Here was a man who had held absolute authority over hundreds of sailors, asking a subordinate officer to help him improve. It showed a humility and self-awareness that Sarah had never suspected he possessed. "Sir, I'd be honored to help in any way I can. But the most important thing is that you've already taken the first step by recognizing that change was needed." The Admiral nodded thoughtfully. "You know, Commander, when I started my career, I thought leadership meant always being right, never showing weakness, and maintaining distance from subordinates. Today I learned that real leadership means being willing to admit when you're wrong, having the courage to change, and recognizing excellence wherever it comes from." Sarah gathered up her 5 bronze stars, placing them carefully back in their case. "Sir, those are lessons that benefit everyone in the Navy, the sailors under your command, the missions we're assigned to complete, and the country we serve to protect." As Sarah prepared to leave the Admiral's office, she felt a sense of closure that had been years in the making. Not just for herself, but for all the women who had served before her and those who would serve after. The conversation had been about more than one prejudiced officer and one overlooked commander. It had been about changing a culture that still had room for improvement. The Admiral watched her walk toward the door, then called out one final time, "Captain Mitchell." Sarah turned and for a moment didn't realize he was talking to her. Then the significance of his words hit her. He was already using her new rank. "Yes, sir? Thank you. For your service, for your patience, and for giving an old sailor a chance to become better than he was." Sarah saluted crisply. "Thank you, sir, for being willing to listen and to change." As she left the Admiral's office, Sarah felt the weight of her bronze stars in her pocket and the promise of new opportunities ahead. The morning had started with a career-ending confrontation, but it was ending with recognition, advancement, and the hope that her example might make things easier for the next generation of female officers. The Admiral remained in his office as evening fell over the base. He picked up his pen and began drafting new policies for performance evaluation and promotion procedures. It was time to ensure that merit, not prejudice, determined who advanced in his command. Outside, the rescued crew of the Northern Star was being processed through medical checks and debriefing sessions. They had no idea that their rescue had been part of a larger story about courage, prejudice, and the power of proven excellence to change minds and policies. The 5 bronze stars had done more than earn Sarah Mitchell a promotion. They had forced an entire base to confront its assumptions about leadership, competence, and the value of diversity in military service. And in the end, that might have been their most important mission of all.